The undeniable fact is, we're here. And the irresistible question is, why? The human race has been contemplating that question for a very long time. And that question segues into a discussion on theism and atheism, belief in God or disbelief. Which one makes better sense? Which one is in harmony with the evidence as we know it? That will be the topic of discussion for us over the next few weeks. So let's get started right at the beginning, shall we? Let's start at Genesis 1, verse 1, which tells us, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. At some point in the distant past, God spoke the universe into existence. That's the claim of Scripture. There was a point where it didn't exist, and then it did exist. But you know what's fascinating? Today, astrophysicists and astronomers concur with the testimony of the Scripture in this respect, that the universe began to exist. It's not infinite, it's finite. There was a moment where it came into existence. That is impressive. And so the sacred and the secular tell us the same thing, that the universe began at some point in the past. Now, scientists use a lot of different evidences to come up with that idea or to support such an idea. I think the most persuasive one, at least to my mind, is the expanding universe. Since the 1920s and the Hubble telescope, we know and continue to affirm that the galaxies beyond our own are expanding out in every direction, exponentially. And so the deduction that comes from this realization is that at one time, everything began from a single point of immense density, often referred to as the Big Bang, or Genesis 1:1, whatever you want to call it. So their reasoning goes like this: everything's expanding out. Let's pretend it's a video game. Let's pretend we could press stop on the universe. That would create confusion, wouldn't it? But let's pretend we can. We can hit stop. Everything stops. And then we can hit rewind. And everything begins to recede in the universe. It all begins to come back to its origins. And so if we let that rewind long enough, the idea is eventually it would all be sucked back into that point of immense density, maybe the size of the head of a pin, maybe smaller, from which everything that exists would emerge, would erupt out of this explosive instant of time. Wow. Astrophysicists, astronomers, and Scripture all tell us the same thing. The universe began to exist. There was a time when naturalists, or at least some naturalists, hoped that wasn't the case. Why? Because if the universe was just infinite, there would be no reason to try and explain it, just has always been. But the fact that it's finite produces a lot of difficult issues and questions. And so the reason some naturalists, by the way, a naturalist is a person who says the physical universe is all there is. There's nothing else. There's no God. There's no spiritual realm. The physical world is reality. It's all there is. The universe and everything in it. But the reason some naturalists were disappointed by the finite universe is because of the consequence of that being true. It raises some very prickly issues for atheists. And this is where I feel the Kalam cosmological argument is a great asset to theists, to those of us who believe in God. It's logical, it's incisive, it's true to fact, it's how everything operates, and it's never falsified. And when applied to the universe, seems to demand a creator. It goes like this. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Well, that's very clear, isn't it? That's always true. That's never falsified. But then it continues on. So everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. That is an impressive piece of logic. And when you get down to it, when you move the extraneous out of the way and you kind of get down to your options that are left, you're kind of left with this. The naturalist, often associated with atheism, will be left to say, well, nothing created everything. Because there's nothing beyond the physical world. There's nothing beyond the universe. This is all there is. But to believe that nothing created something is an absurdity. And to believe that nothing created everything is an absurdity on steroids. No one believes that's true. But that's what they're left with. To the other side, the theists, those who believe in a creator and a designer, well, that's in harmony with our thinking. We would be like, well, yes, something created everything. Something created the physical realm. Now, granted, that syllogism in and of itself does not argue that it was the God of the Bible who did it. It doesn't say that specifically, though it does point in that direction. But of course something had to create everything. Of course something had to create the existence of the universe. You can't generate yourself. The universe simply can't self-generate and be there. One moment nothing, one moment everything. That's just not the way the world works, and we know it. And that's the point of this. We know it. Now, some will continue to argue maybe there was an oscillating universe. It expands, it contracts. It expands, it contracts. And it's been going on forever. It just, doesn't seem like it was eternal. Could that be the case? Well, 1 out of 100 trillion, and etc. Can't completely rule it out, but it's not scientific. There's no evidence that happened. There's no reason to believe that would be so. The only reason someone would assert that is because they're trying to negate the logical consequence of the Kalam argument and of other arguments. Could you say, well, it just did happen. It just did. And again, if you got, one part out of trillions, trillions, billions, zillions, and trillions again, even if that did happen, which didn't, but even if it did, it doesn't negate my point. It doesn't negate the argument. My point, my argument is theism makes better sense than atheism. Even if one out of, this trillions and trillions and trillions, and numbers get to be ridiculous and just beyond grasping, even if that happened, it certainly wouldn't be scientific. It would be magic. It would be smoke and mirrors. Naturalism is defeated before it takes its very first step, because everyone knows nothing can't create anything, far less everything. There needs to be an intelligence, a mind that creates everything. And so, as we get started in our thoughts and discussions on theism versus atheism, I submit to you that from the very outset, by the fact that the universe began, belief in God makes logical, reasonable, rational sense, because we all know only something can create everything. See you next time.